From London, we present Orbit 10, a play in 6 episodes by Peter Elliot Hayes. Episode 4, The Voices.
This is Tom Lambert again. You've now heard 3 of the 6 tape recordings made by Dr. Hayward Petrie. But on that November night in the college laboratory, when the green rod went into action for the second time, we were very far from halfway to the truth. Even as the 3 of them watched a solid steel lamp dwindle and vanish into the cylinder, they could not dream of what was yet to come. But Dr. Petrie must take up the story for himself. Here is the 4th recording.
Continuation of notes, reel 4. If I had watched it alone, I would have disbelieved my own eyes. But we all saw it. That heavy, jointed lamp shrink to a speck and then literally suck into the glowing core of the rod. Almost at once, the disturbance, noise, light, vibration began to subside.
Look, do you see? The light's dimming.
And the mist in the cubicle is clearing. But there's no way for it to get out.
It doesn't need a way out. It's being reabsorbed into the rod where it came from.
There's nothing else in there. The lamp's gone completely.
And we wondered what power that thing possessed. Now we know.
Yes.
It can absorb solid matter.
No.
Those objects missing from the shelf are Kirkhewish.
Of course.
The way the workbench that thing was standing on seemed to vanish. The dust that was left, they went. The same way as that lamp.
But it's impossible. Solids, gases can't pass through each other. It's a question of densities. It's a law of physics.
Well, one of our laws, perhaps. But must they apply everywhere? Under sufficient pressure, water can be forced through a steel plate. A solid can pass through a gas. But a splinter of superfrozen hydrogen can be driven into a wooden board. It's all a question of applied forces. We only understand these things in our own terms.
Yes, sir, but physical and chemical changes always leave something, some deposit.
Yes.
Look at the rod now. It's gone quite dull. You can see through it again.
They can.
Just the wires and the gray thing in the center. Nothing else.
No, nothing else.
But that lamp just can't disappear off the face of the earth.
Can't it? After tonight, who are we to say what's impossible? Thank heaven we had that cabinet made. If this had happened in the open.
Yes.
It seems to work more powerfully each time.
Now listen, both of you. I'll repeat what I said 3 days ago. And this time I mean it. After this, we must never open that cubicle. Not for any reason.
No.
All right.
If solid matter can be drawn in, it could be, well, extremely dangerous.
Doctor?
Yes?
The book I was looking at, before Cliff sounded the buzzer. That illustration, I think you're right.
Yes, that organism in the center. It has all the same characteristics, only on a much larger scale. The resemblance is perfect.
And the photograph was of human nerve cells.
Yes, each one perhaps 1/10,000th of an inch in diameter. But the cells that thing is made up of must be 1/4 of an inch across. If that material comes from some kind of living being, for some reason, in some way, enclosed, sealed in, well, the mind staggers at the possibilities. Don't you realize it's simply a question of scale? A human, if he were composed of cells that size, he'd be almost 3 miles high. Later that night, leaving Clifford and Elizabeth on watch, I went alone to my study. I wanted to think. This had suddenly become something far larger than a laboratory problem. This powerful, ruthless mechanism, lying buried for years beneath a Hebridean beach with the sea washing indifferently over it, how had it got there? And, more vital, where it had begun its existence? At last, I picked up the telephone and called Sir Edward Bancroft at his home in Kent. Edward made no comment as I told him the facts. When I'd finished, he told me to come down to Westerham at once and bring my students with me. I wonder now if either of us realized that it was 3 a.m. I shall always remember that drive through the wet, empty suburbs and later through the black Surrey lanes. And at 4:30, we were sitting in Edward's panelled drawing room around the ashes of a dead fire with the first grey of dawn coming over the Kent hills.
excuse the pajamas and dressing gown, won't you?
Yes, of course.
Don't usually receive guests like this. But guests usually come at a respectable hour.
Well, Ed, sorry.
My wife's making coffee. She'll be here in a minute.
Perhaps I should have waited until the morning.
No, you did quite right, Hayward. Well, at least you didn't write off the college completely.
Not quite.
And these are the readings you collected.
Yes, sir.
Radiation level reached 5 Roentgens. Temperature down to minus 11 in 80 seconds. Vibrations up to 12,000 cycles. Quite a lively little gadget, isn't it?
And we lost a lamp.
Yes. Look, Hayward, it's no good our thinking up glib explanations and sticking our heads in the sand. I'm in touch with technological advances pretty well everywhere, and I can tell you that no one has produced anything like this. So, we're forced to consider the possible alternative.
That the cylinder did not originate on this planet.
Not a new idea to you, perhaps.
No, it's not.
We've shot umpteen satellites into space. Some of them have stayed up.
Some of them haven't.
But what do we know about what comes into our own planetary back garden? Practically nothing.
I agree.
This could be our first contact with some other intelligence.
Yes.
The thing probably isn't meant to do any harm. It may be just a complex instrument hopelessly out of its element running wild. Imagine Sputnik 99 thumping down on Venus and disgorging sparks, radio signals, and guinea pigs. The inhabitants, if any, would be quite justified in taking a sledgehammer to it and asking questions afterwards. This could be something like that.
Yes, but where in the solar system could it have come from? The composition of the planets is well known. None of them can support the kind of life to bring off an achievement like this.
And I think, sir, our cylinder can bite a little harder than the average guinea pig.
It can.
And it'll take more than a sledgehammer to even chip it.
Yes, so you've seen.
We have indeed.
Well, none of us is qualified to make decisions on this. In the morning, I shall give Charles a ring.
Charles?
Lord Heatherton, the Minister of Science.
Oh, of course.
Lives in Whitehall somewhere. We're getting a little out of our depth, Hayward. I'm afraid officialdom must take over.
Yes, but whatever happens, I must have facilities to continue studying that rod. I can't stop now.
I know, Charles, you have every facility. And the cylinder for the moment seems safe enough where it is.
Oh.
Don't look so glum, all of you. You may have made the most important discovery in the history of our world.
I hope so, Edward, but, I don't know. I just wish there wasn't something about that thing that makes me want to throw it back into the sea.
That's not like you, Hayward. You're tired. Been going at it too hard.
Perhaps.
We must take this one careful step at a time. Ah, here's that copy. Yes, poor old Heatherton. Cambridge, he was just rotten at high on that.
I reached home as my housekeeper was laying breakfast. If my unshaven, disheveled appearance was a shock for her, there was one waiting for me, too. Almost at once, the telephone rang. Oh, Cardiff University. Yes, this is Dr. Petrie. Thank you. Hello?
Good morning, Hayward.
Morning.
Trevor Hughes here.
Good.
Did I get you out of bed?
No, you didn't.
Good, good.
How is Welsh Wales this morning?
Cold and damp, but better than London any day. Hayward.
Yes.
You asked me to have a look at that colliery, Llan Weslin in the Rhondda.
Yes, of course. Now, have I wasted your time?
I got it over my students doing some detecting, ones who come from that part.
Hold on.
I've a good mind to advise the dean to send them down, every mother son of them.
Why, what have they done?
A couple of them were keen potholers. They thought this was too good to miss. Worse, one of them had worked in a pit.
Well?
They went to Llan Weslin, but everything seemed quiet enough, including the pit keeper who was having a sleep. Of course, there was no way of getting down the old shaft, but did that discourage them? The idiots went down their way. Potholing gear, ropes, lamps, and all the rest. They ought to be shot. Believe it or not, they got down to the level of the first working and went half a mile into the galleries.
Good for them.
Good for...
Sorry, I mean a very foolhardy of them.
Mad as hatters.
Yes.
Luckily, the pit is still in quite good shape, except for a few small collapses and a little flooding. But at the very end of the east working, Hayward, they say they found a kind of cavern.
Oh, yes?
It must have formed since the pit was closed. And then, clambering about with their lamps, they found something else.
What? What did they find?
An object covered in mineral deposits sticking out of the debris. Tubular, 7 or 8 feet long. They described it as some sort of cylinder.
Oh. So it's not the only one. They didn't try to move it?
No, the air was foul. They had to come up.
Thank heaven for that. Now, Trevor, I can't explain it all now, but They must not go down again.
Yes.
We have a similar object here in the college.
What?
Yes, and we don't know what it may be.
Have you been climbing down coal mines at your age?
No, this was found on an island in the Hebrides. Now we know of 2.
Good heavens.
I'll call you later, Trevor.
All right, yes.
And those students of yours, be strict with them. Get them sent down, definitely.
Yes, I should, of course. On the other hand, one could say they showed a good sense of initiative. What are you laughing at?
Oh, nothing. Thanks for your help. Goodbye. Shortly afterwards, the telephone rang again. It was Sir Edward Bancroft. He told me he'd arranged an appointment for me with the Minister of Science, 4 o'clock that afternoon in Whitehall. A cloud of uncertainty was gathering in my mind, a dark, forbidding cloud. And I knew then where the answer lay. I went to Fleet Street, to Tom Lambert.
Well, Doctor, are we in business or aren't we?
Yes. Lambert, I owe you an apology.
No, not at all.
You were right to drag me down to Llanwethlin. After this, I'll respect journalistic intuition. There is another cylinder in that pit.
There is?
Yes. It was found yesterday.
Well, it was a shot in the dark, but I've had my eye on this longer than you have, Doctor. You know, years ago, I began noticing the way similar reports kept turning up.
Yes?
Well, I hadn't a ghost of a theory for them, but once a journalist smells a mystery...
Oh, I know.
Well, anyway, I started a private news library.
Just so, and that's why I came.
Huh?
You showed me some cuttings on the train to Wales. There were about 7, I remember.
Yeah, but they were only a few of them.
A few?
Well, didn't I make that clear?
No. How many more are there?
You'd better see the file. All of it. Should be in here. And I've only been at this for a few years. Here we are.
Oh, it's very thick. Uh-huh. One cutting dated 1907. Mystery earth tremors in Lincolnshire. 1919. Strike at Kent Quarry. Narrow escapes as fissure opens. 1929. Frostbite in midsummer. Strange sounds on Exmoor.
And plenty more, going back for 50 years. 40 accounts in all.
40?
And they all have a familiar ring, don't they, Doctor? Maybe even this isn't the whole story. Look, turn to the last sheet. One I came across by accident when I was in Jordan last year.
Syrian village devastated. Humming heard as ground subsides. Green light. Vibration felt in Damascus. Good heavens.
Yeah.
Arriving. It was coming nearer. At last we were beginning to glimpse the vast outline which only too soon was to become dreadfully clear. And things were not only happening in London. Since our return, we'd had too much to occupy us to give much thought to where it had all begun, the radio telescope on the Isle of Skara. But on that desolate headland in the control room beneath the huge brooding bowl, McLaren and Garrick were making discoveries of their own.
We're still a long way from breaking down the signals themselves, but you check the calculations yourself, sir. What conclusion would you come to?
The signals faded steadily for 6 months. Now they're growing stronger again. The source moving away from us.
And coming back?
Yes. And these progressions are regular.
Yes.
That means the motion of the point of origin is curved. An arc.
And an arc is part of a circle.
Or an ellipse.
An ellipse?
And that can only mean one thing. An orbit.
Yes.
These transmissions are coming from a solid body orbiting round the sun like a planet, somewhere beyond Pluto. 9 planets and... Peter, do you realize what this could be?
Yes, what every astronomer has been wondering since Pluto was discovered in 1930.
Yes. Well, the universities must see these figures and... No, I must discuss this with Petrie first. We need his opinion. I'll send him a telegram and go down to London for a few days.
Right, sir.
I rather want to see what he's making of that wee souvenir he took home with him.
Late the next afternoon, I sent Clifford and Elizabeth away from the laboratory. I wanted to study my notes alone, and there now seemed no purpose in watching the silent cylinder all the time. Also, Elizabeth seemed to be growing more depressed each day, as if something were weighing on her mind. She and Clifford retired rather discouraged, probably to spend the evening at their usual coffee bar, and I went home. At about 11 o'clock that night in my study in Eaton Square, I was examining a thick folder of calculations and diagrams. Professor McLaren, who had arrived with it an hour before, watched me curiously.
Well, is it or isn't it?
Campbell, I want to be the first to congratulate you. These figures are conclusive. A large orbiting body within the solar system. There can be only one explanation. A new 10th planet.
Orbit 10.
That's it. It's been suspected for years. A planet so distant, so dark, that no telescope, even yours, can detect it.
No, we would never have known without those signals. But that's where they're coming from, Hayward. Signals from the 10th planet.
It must be enormous, possibly even larger than Jupiter. A vast, frozen giant. And its journey around the sun must take something like 700 years. I wonder, Campbell.
Yes?
Well, suppose those cylinders of mine scattered over the Earth have some connection with it. They take in solid matter and it vanishes completely. It's a fantastic process, and it must have a purpose. Is it possible that they absorb substances in order to transmit them elsewhere? To send them perhaps back to where the cylinders themselves came from? Back across space? Back to the 10th planet itself? If so, we're up against something so big we don't realize it's staring us in the face.
Like another coffee, Liz?
Hmm?
That one must be cold.
Oh, no thanks. I'm not hungry.
I only said... Oh, I'll skip it. Well, if the Martians are on the way, they surely have a Lulu of a technique. Nerve warfare. And we're the first victims. Any time now, we'll be at one another's throats.
Oh, Cliff, don't. Don't say things like that, even in fun.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Shall we talk about the weather?
I'm tired. I think I'll go and... Oh, I left my file of notes in the lab, and I want to write them up at home. I'd better slip back and get them.
Not alone, you don't. Petrie won't be there. I'll walk up to the college with you.
No. I'd rather be on my own. I'll ring you tomorrow.
Okay. I'll stay here a bit.
Sorry, Cliff.
No, forget it.
Good night.
Night.
Elizabeth left the coffee bar at exactly 11:35. She walked into Cromwell Road, entered the deserted college, and took the lift up to the 3rd floor. Reaching the laboratory and switching on the lights, the first thing she did was look quickly at the rod standing in the Densolite cubicle. It was dull and silent. Elizabeth could see her own pale face reflected, distorted in its polished green surface. Automatically, she ran her eye over the recording instruments. The meter needles were all quite still. Near the cubicle lay the cylinder, a huge, empty shell. She smiled. Already, dust was gathering on it. She collected her folder of papers from the bench and walked back towards the door. And then, she stopped. Even before she looked round, she knew. By the air becoming colder each second, chilling, biting, and by the slow flood of unearthly green light which bathed the wall, confronting her with her own black rearing shadow. And as she spun round, her breath made a white cloud and something crackled under her feet. Frost, forming rapidly, white and glinting. The green glare from the rod, growing fiercer, hurt her eyes. Then the vibration, rattling the benches and apparatus, dinning in her ears and dulling her mind. She found herself walking against her will towards the cubicle, her aching eyes fixed on the glowing core of the rod. Something seemed to be drawing her towards it. She bumped something. It clicked as she put out a hand, but she went on. She cried out, but her voice seemed not to belong to her, to come from a vast distance. Seconds passed. There was no thought in her mind. And then, something seemed to burn her fingers. Forcing her eyes down, she saw it was the lock bar of the cabinet, white with ice. She had lifted it, and the door was swinging open. Now she was very close to the blazing rod, and softly, silently, a gray vapor was beginning to seep from its surface. With a frantic effort, she forced herself to think, to move, to step back. But the noise wouldn't let her think. Something somewhere was calling, demanding, willing her to obey. Her eyes fell on the laboratory telephone. One clear thought, one hope came, and she clung to it.
Telephone. Cliff. Coffee bar. Phone number. Seen it so often. Phone number on the menus. Think. Sloan. 01. Number on the menus. Sloan. Yes. 0181.
The frozen steel of the telephone dial bit at her fingers. It seemed to take all her strength to turn it, release it. It whirred back. Her mind was blurring, slipping away again. Another one. And another. And another.
Hello? Oh, yes, he is here. I tell him. Hey, Mr. Clifford, your young lady is on the phone for you.
Okay.
Hello? Cliff here. Is that you, Liz? Hello?
Oh, Cliff, I tried. I didn't know if...
Hey, Liz. What's wrong?
Oh, Cliff, please come. Please. I can't fight it much longer.
Oh, Liz, what is it? Are you in the lab?
Yes. Cliff, help me. I mustn't go back.
Liz. Liz! Honey, hang on. Whatever it is, hang on. I'll be right with you. Liz! Liz, are you in there? Liz, for heaven's sake, can you hear me?
Clifford had reached the college, the doors of the laboratory. They wouldn't open. Something had fallen across them, jamming them on the inside. Peering helplessly through the glass panels, he saw grey, swirling vapor. The room was choked with it, and everywhere a wintry whiteness of frost and ice. He saw dimly the open cubicle and the rod glowing a dull green. The telephone and its receiver just clear of the floor, swinging slowly on its cord. But there was no sign of Elizabeth. The laboratory seemed quite empty.
That was Orbit 10, a play in 6 episodes written by Peter Elliot Hayes and produced for the BBC by David Duse.